So he doesn't care about your plans at all, and very often dashes them completely to pieces. And yet, being the kind of person who plans, who thinks about these contingencies, is developing the competence as well as the confidence that allows you to adapt and improvise and adjust to these things as they're happening. If all you can imagine is things going the way that you want them to go, and they don't go your way, that's when you're in real trouble. That's the blow that lands heaviest, as Seneca is saying. But if you understand that you have to have plans, plural, right? That part of your plan should be planning for your plans falling apart. Now we're in very different, much more resilient
One of the things I talk about in Stillness is the key is creating some space, right? Time and space for reflection, for talking things through, for thinking about yourself from a little bit of a distance. And therapy can be a great place to do that. And that's where today's sponsor comes in, BetterHelp. Because that time and space is so important for me, I don't want to drive all the way across town for therapy. I don't want to look for parking. I don't want to get stuck in traffic. I just want to be able to talk to someone on the phone or over text. And that's what you can do with BetterHelp. BetterHelp makes it super easy to get started. They match you with a therapist based on your preferences, their own clinical experience. You just do an online quiz. They match you with a therapist. You can switch therapists at any time at no cost. And BetterHelp has over a decade of matching expertise. And you can join 6 million people who have gotten help from BetterHelp. It's a platform you can trust. You can click the link below or just go to betterhelp.com/dailystoic to get 10% off your first month of therapy with BetterHelp.
And as it happens, he didn't need that first lesson because the initial landing was successful. But not long after, he does begin to run into problems. In the days after the successful landings, as they're trying to make this thrust into France and to liberate Europe, the Allied troops get bogged down, mostly in the hedgerows of France. They just have, it's slower than they wanted, and what it does is it gives the Germans a chance to throw an enormous counter-offensive at them. The Germans know that basically the whole war is on the line, and they throw everything they have. Something like 200,000 troops in this massive counter-offensive, where they're attempting to throw the Allies back and defeat this landing, which Churchill had always dreaded happening, and in fact, why he had delayed the potential landing at Normandy over and over again. He just understood that if it failed here, they'd probably have to sweep the peace in some way. And so it's almost unimaginable what a 200,000 men Nazi counteroffensive would have looked like. But the German Blitzkrieg was one of the most overwhelming and intimidating developments in modern warfare. At the beginning of the war, these columns of Panzer tanks rushing into Poland and Belgium and France were unstoppable. And part of the reason that they were so unstoppable was this perception that they were unstoppable. Many armies simply surrendered in the face of them, and there was a real chance that this would happen to the Allies, that order would break down and they would get thrown back to the sea. And so it's here at this moment that I think Eisenhower is at his absolute best, and in a way, at his most stoic. There's this magnificent scene. He strides into his field quarters. He has all of his generals gathered there, many of whom are rattled, they're convinced they're outmatched, they're not sure what's happening. And Eisenhower says, look, I want this situation to be regarded not as a disaster, but as an opportunity. He says there's only be cheerful faces at this conference table. And what's he doing here? Is he just trying to cheer people up? Is he just wishful thinking? Is this the opposite of the negative visualization from before? Positive manifestation? No. What Eisenhower is realizing is that there's an opportunity inside this enormous Yes, there is a huge rush of German troops coming at them. But he realizes that if they can absorb this, if the psychological part of the blow doesn't work, that if the Allied lines absorb this blow, that actually it can be their chance to sort of sow this thing. Patton grasps this quite clearly too. He says, "Oh, I get it. The Nazis have stuck their head in a meat grinder." I think this is actually
那我
quite
其实特别
similar
好
to
奇，
what
像
Mark Lewis talks
司
about
徒
in
内彦祖
Meditation
里
for
都很
Zen.
年轻的，
The impediment
虽然演的
to
角色的年纪好像还算适配，但是因为年代横跨了几十年，所以我不知道你们在一开始准备的时候去接近这个人物的时候，导演在从哪些方面启发你？比如说你去看过往的很多电影，当时的很多文字，评测组怎么样做
and
准
then
备？
attacking from the sides.
其实在我进组之前，我们主唱老师是有给到我一些
And look, I
那
don't
个
mean
年
to be
代
glib
下
about
南
this.
洋
This
的
is
前
an
辈那
extremely
些史
difficult
实
thing to
资
do,
料，
and it costs
还有一
thousands and
些
thousands of
华
lives.
侨女性的纪录片吧。我通过那些片子会去观察他们的行为举止啊，还有他们做事上面的分寸感，跟我们现代的人有什么不同？可能他们会更加内敛一些，然后
Of German men and
就是
material.
对
Eventually,
于我们来说会
they
更沉稳。
encircle and
所以前
ensnare
期的话，
something
我
like
是通过这些资料去
50,000
了解，
German
而且我们
troops.
主创
Actually,
团
my
队有给
grandfather
过我们一个
landed
手
at
册，
Normandy
叫《
2
暹罗生活
days
手
after
册》，
V-Day.
让
He
我们
fights in the Battle of
去
the
根据
Bulge.
里面的
He
内容，
wins
然
the
后
French
做到像那个
there.
年代
The
真正生活在那里的人
invincible,
一样。
哎，你看你刚用两个词，一个内敛，一个沉稳，我觉得都是非常精准的抓住那个时代人物的一些
it's
特
a
质，但是
suicidal
很难演。
overreach.
因为
A
它内敛就
textbook
是在里
example
面的
of，why you
沉稳也
can't
在里
read
面的，可
your
是看电影我们需要
French.
看
It's
到
both.，
所以我能感受到你整个人物在里面那个动态，你的脖子还有整个背感觉是不同的。你当时你的关键词是你怎么做到？
因为南枝他这个角色有一个非常明显的特质，就是他可能表面上看起来波澜不惊，但其实他内心的情感不一定像表面看起来那么平静。所以我是试着去抓取人物当下的一个内心状态。可能有时候你想他之所想，比面上就已经呈现出来了。这样。
那岳彤你呢？你的这个准备过程是不是跟松有一点像？也是看过一些资料、看电影吗？
Emotional and physical discipline that we use. I say in 1944, he was appointed Supreme Allied Commander of the Allied forces in World War II. He suddenly controlled an army of some 3 million men, the typical war effort that ultimately involved
其中有一
more
场
than
戏就
50
着火
million
了，
And there
然后
at
孤
the
身
head
回
of an
去。
alliance of nations
那
totaling
那个
an
时
upward
刻，
of
我不知道作为演
700
员，
million
当时内心你要给
citizens,
自己写一
he
个
discovered that
人物
far
小
from
传
being
或者
exempt
一个
from
准备
the
的
rules,
话，你要
he
想，
had to
那
be
此刻孤
stricter
身
with
回去，我要
himself.
先去救我的抢我
And
的
he
底
came to
线。
find that the
他
best
说
way
要
to
去
lead was
就
not by
把那
force
钱
or
找出
fiat,
来。
but
就
through
是你当时
persuasion,
准备的时候，你
compromise,
带着什
through
么样的一些
patience,
情绪
by
和内
controlling
心的
his
一些思
temper,
想活
and
动
most
去
of
拍那
all
场戏
by
的？
example. And he recalls that in this moment and moments throughout his life, something that his mother used to quote from the book of Proverbs in the Bible, that he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit is better than he that taketh a city. And this is something the Stoics talk about, that to be in power, you have to first be under your own power. And so you have to understand that Eisenhower conquers the world. He is victorious at D-Day, over 8
导演
decades
当时要
ago,
怎么样
because
去
he
启
is
发他们吗？
first
还是说你
victorious
你特
over
别觉得一
himself,
个人的最初
victorious
的这种演员的
over
本能，
delusion
其实
of
很可贵的。
grandeur, wishful thinking, and then later victorious over pessimistic thinking, over panic, over doubt, over fear. But when we control our emotions, when we can see things objectively, when we can stand steadily despite everything that's happening around us, it becomes possible to do that mental flip, right? To not just see what's bad about a situation, what's hard about a situation, what's going wrong, but the opportunity within. Like, imagine being in Eisenhower's shoes. Like, this enormous army is racing on you. You push all your chips into the center. Everyone around you is discouraged and disillusioned and doubtful. And he was able to see not just a way to muddle through it, but to use this to his advantage to turn the whole thing around. And that's what stoicism is. It's not this passive, resigned, hopeless thing. But it's something deeper than that, something more profound than that. And it's something we cultivate in our study and in our thinking, so that in these big moments, big in the scheme of the world and in our own lives, so that we can use them when it counts.
你知道我在影片开始不久，就是阿嬷知道了，木生已经很早就去世了，她站起来走出那个她的很高的那个门槛，然后说要去看看橄榄怎么样，就能明显感到，特别像我们生活当中的长辈，一旦有什么事，他要掩饰自己内心情绪波动，他要顾左右而言他。但是影片当中讲到橄榄关键时刻不止一次。每一次都是靠他来掩饰，然后洗橄榄，然后那个手瞬间就那个画面又叠到了很多年前，然后最后要去泰国说要炒橄榄菜。这个橄榄是为什么是橄榄？大家都知道橄榄是一个很重要的一个植物作物在那里。除此之外，还有什么别的意象作用吗？
philosophy. I think it holds exactly what you're looking for. In fact, two people together can make you both more stoic. So I've written a number of best-selling books about stoicism and self-improvement, but like as just a regular human being, I've been happily married to my wife now for over a decade. We've been together for almost 20 years, and I am also the proud father to young boys. And in this video, I want to give you some stoic lessons that will help you choose the right partner, become a better partner, how to love more intentionally, and live a better life. It's got to start where I think all philosophy has to start. This is actually inscribed the Temple of Apollo, which has the Oracle of Delphi. It's this idea that we must know. Right? How can you be with another person? How can you have a happy life if you don't know what makes you happy? If you don't know what you want out of life? If you don't understand. One of my favorite characters in Tristan Takes Arch is the French writer and thinker Montaigne. And Montaigne had a unusual education, fluent in all these different languages, he's read all the great texts, but he was taught from an early age that he had to understand himself. That even when we are studying other people, we're studying history, this is the purpose of this is to better understand ourselves. What makes us tick, why we do what we do, what are our pitfalls, what are our blind spots, what are our predilections. He famously said, I would rather be an authority on myself than on system. And I think by the end of his life, he knows something about his virtues and his vices. That's what his famous essay is. Right? He knows about the monstrosities and the miracles and the mundanities that are all inside him, as they are inside us. It's a sad fate, Seneca said, for a man to die too well known to everyone else, but unknown to himself. Most of us have met many people, but how many self-aware people have we met? Actually, Blaise Pascal would say that one must know oneself. He says, even if it does not help in finding the truth, it helps in running one's life. How do you know what you want in a person? How do you know what you're good at? How do you know what you bring to the table? Obviously, this is the journey of life. But it is also the secret to good relationships. So much of the practical problems that can come up in relationships are rooted in who we were as a child. Assumptions we have, aversions we have, attractions we have, things we like, things we don't like, scripts that are running in our head that if you're not aware of, if you're not clear on whether they're positive or negative, whether you want to be acting this way or not, you're just going to get yourself into trouble. Just knowing yourself is going to help you choose the right person, and it's going to also help you get away from the wrong people. It's going to help you stay with the right person. And I think this is something that Shakespeare actually criticized on, this idea of two angles be true. I think so often in relationships people are pretending to be someone they are not for someone else's sake, and that's not going to work either, right? Both you and your partner or your partners are going to be evolving as you grow. And you have to be aware of this and able to articulate it and ideally help each other on that journey. Epictetus is ripping on Socrates. He says, look, some people are trying to cultivate land, some people are trying to breed horses. He says, me, I cultivate my own improvement. People want to find the right person, but how many of us stop and ask, like, are you the right person for anyone else? Are you really the catch that you think you are? And so if we can think of philosophy and stoicism as a guide to self-improvement, how to be better than you are, how to delight in your own improvement, and here we don't mean like do you have a perfect six-pack? Do you have broad shoulders? Do you make a lot of money? But like, are you a good person? Are you working on yourself? Are you getting better? That's how you make yourself attractive to others. That's how you make a good match. That's how you are a catch. Now, once you're in a relationship, this doesn't stop. You can't just let yourself go. You can't just be like, well, I did it, and you're stuck with me. No, you should be wanting to get better. This is why I go to therapy. This is why my wife and I have lots of conversations about, hey, I could use more of this, or have you thought about this? We spur each other to be better, to work on ourselves, and I think the work my wife has done on herself is really inspiring me to get better. I think the converse is true. The Stoic is working on this. That's what Mark Aurelius is doing in meditations. He's trying to be more patient. He's trying to be more understanding. He's trying to be kinder. He's trying to remind himself what's important. He's trying to be less judgmental. Stoics would say no one is wise or good or virtuous on accident. It's work. It is constant dedication and commitment. And if you want to have a good relationship, if you want to be the kind of person that people want to be in a relationship with, you have to do this. Alright, so this seems obvious, but a lot of people mess this up. Like 50% of people mess this up. Right? You have to pick the right person. And this arguably might be the most important choice. Winston Churchill, who makes a lot of critical decisions, he says that the most important decision, the decision that most leads to his success, was his decision to marry his wife. That his greatest good fortune was finding Clementine, his wife. There was a person behind the scenes, often in front of the scenes, all along the way. Clementine Churchill is strong and charismatic. She's incredibly intelligent. She makes Churchill better personally, professionally. She balances him out. She builds political allies. She mends relationships. He's an emotional, erratic person. Fits of depression, these fits of ego, fits of anger. And she's the one, especially during the war, who's like his sort of emotional balance. She stabilizes him. She prevents him from doing reckless and irresponsible things a lot. Now, she doesn't always get credit for this, but people who know them knew the role that she played. And she also didn't just agree with her husband, support him like unconditionally. No, she calls him out. She challenges him. Some of her most famous letters are prompting him to stop doing this, start doing this. She is a critical sounding board and advisor to him. Much in the same way that Pericles' wife is one of the primary advisors and stabilizers to Pericles in the midst of that clash of civilizations, the Peloponnesian War. I think a lot of people think that being married will tie them down, will negatively impact their career. And I would argue, yes, it will tie you down, it will hold you back, it will tie you down to reality, it will hold you back from making sometimes fatal errors. There's a Stoic that most people don't know, but was actually critical in the development of Stoic thought. I talked about him in Stoics. His name is Antipater. It was a couple hundred years before Marcus Aurelius, and he's one of the first Stoics to talk about the importance of relationships in marriage. To Antipater, like a successful city, a successful world could only be built around the keystone of family. He says that among the primary and most necessary of appropriate actions is finding your life partner and marrying. Actually, Foucault, the 20th century French philosopher, would credit Antipater with pioneering like a new, more modern concept of marriage, not just a legal arrangement, not just a financial arrangement. We're talking about a relationship of marriage where souls are blended, where they both become better for being together. The Stoic word, which means home, it was perfected in marriage. It was about creating a sanctuary, a citadel that could withstand the blows of fate and facilitate the good life. And as I said before, I think my wife is much more naturally Stoic than I am, and she's been with me through my businesses, the businesses we created together, books that I've written, raising our sons together. None of the things I have achieved or managed to do I think would have been possible on my own. I was just in positions that I, as a 20-year-old, was not emotionally equipped to handle. Like the bookstore, the studio where this is happening, like not only was it her idea, but it looks the way that it looks because she designed it. I guess what I'm saying is that one of the first and most essential things you can do in your life is find someone who makes you better, who you in turn can do the same for.
一开始 像刚才你提到的，我看大纲的时候嘛，我会感觉对南芝这个角色对他做出的决定很敬佩，但是当时的我确实是就不太理解他为什么能够是什么驱使他去做下这个决定。然后我感觉这是一个在塑造他的过程里，我慢慢的去理解他的一个过程吧，因为我根据他人生里面那些遭遇，然后去经历他所经历的之后，我慢慢的会体会到是什么让他开始内心变得柔软，然后直到最后他去做下这个决定。这一个也是我在表演的过程中慢慢去理解的一个事情，尝试跟他产生一些情感上的共鸣。
这场戏就是那个孩子走散，哎，我很好奇，现在还说这个词吗？说现在还说，那你们在生活中会不会有一些什么跟当年不一样的？就一个词它的那个内延跟外涵可能会有一些。
Remember, for the Stoics, that virtue is a thing that you give, not a thing that you get. Right? It's in verb and noun. I think that's an important thing to think about as far as relationships. The ancients talked a lot about giving rather than receiving. Because, by the way, the one thing that these people, how can you be how can you give rather than and as they say, love is about serving. It's about taking pleasure in making somebody else happier and making their life better. We Stoics, Seneca said, take pleasure in bestowing benefits even though they cost us labor, provided that they will laborers of labor. I guess what today we call emotional labor. But Seneca is talking about it could be physical work. It's about being generous with your time. It's about being generous. Energy. Musonius Rufus, another Stoic who actually pioneered some of the Stoic ideas of gender equality, said that a good marriage was one where each person tried to outdo the other in their devotion. And it's not what your partner can do for you, it's what you can do for them. It's about what you can give. And you want to be the kind of person that your partner wants. Sometimes you're person who's ready at the time, or it's just kind of to get form of generosity. It's something you can always Look, the fundamental teaching of Stoicism is that some things are in our control and some things aren't. Well, one of the things you have to remember about relationships is that you control yourself, you don't control the other person. You control who you are, you control how you show up, you control the changes you make, you control your mood, you control yourself too. You don't get to force anyone to do anything. And if you want to see change, you want things to be different, the best place you can start is to focus on yourself. Look, life is hard. People aren't perfect. There's going to be things that your partner does that drive you nuts, and you can focus on getting them to stop doing those things, or you can focus on why this drives you nuts. You don't really need to drive you nuts. Right? They're going to say things that upset you. You can speak up about that, but you also decide how long you're going to hold on to something. As Mark Schmidt says, you don't have to turn this into something. These are events, people, your partner, they're not asking to be judged by you. And I think this is really great advice for siblings, for parents, and
但我觉得刚才叶总讲这一点，我觉得是个非常聪明的一点思维，就是说可以找到说爱是常觉亏欠，
If you can
好
only
像表演
love
可以落
someone
到一个句
if
子，
they're
是说会有
perfect,
抓
if
手，
you
这
expect
是你喜
everything
欢
to
的，
go
以及找到那
seamlessly
个感
every
觉。
time, you're going to be horribly disappointed.
一直在
Part
想到
of
这一
being
点，
in
我
a
觉得他是一
relationship
个非常
is
聪明
going
的
to
演员的
be
思
hurt,
维，
it's
找到
going
一
to
个
be
很好的
frustration,
平
it's
衡
going
点。
to be mistakes. Lucas has been married for 30 years. They have 13 children. When he died, he was profoundly devastated. He had heard
又提到这个，哎呀，这份子蛮热的，这个保姆。
也小伟这个角色，他其实从头到尾贯穿始终，但是呢，他其实有一个很大的一个转变的。 就他抱着一个不切实际的想法到海投，后来他们其实应该想办法怎么样去让出改变的。那你们觉得会改变什么？他们每个人物有非常关键的改变的是什么？你的这个人物那个改变时刻在哪里？
the gladiator and let all the blood run down on his wife. That to him was like, guys, I solved this, and I did not let myself become affected by my emotions today.
There is no sign in anything that Marcus wrote or anything that Marcus did that lends much in the way of credence to these movies. Mercedes Rufus, again, when he was talking about companionship, he said you need to love in sickness and under all conditions, as we say now in marriage vows about in sickness and in health. And Musonius calls out the relationship between Brutus and Portia, two stoics, Portia being the daughter, famously of Plato. And what he loved about this was that it was an example of two people sticking with each other through adversity, who inspired and called each other to greater virtue. I guess what I'm saying is that you can't give up on your partner when things get tough. You can't give up on your relationship when things are tough. You can't expect them to be perfect. You have to love them. There's basically nobody different than Cato and his brothers. Like Cato's the strict stoic, he's disciplined, he's committed, he's austere, and then his brother is, much more of your typical Roman. But Cato loves his brother, and most importantly, he loves him unconditionally. I think about that Bruce Springsteen song, I Need a Woman. He says sometimes when it's your brother you look the other way. He's talking about unconditional love. Obviously it's important with siblings, it's important with kids, but like with your spouse, this is your person, and you have to accept them for who they are. You have to love and support them unconditionally. Some people ask me what the secret to a long, successful marriage is. I do have a secret. I say the secret to staying together is not breaking up. It was on her wedding day that Ruth Bader Ginsburg's mother-in-law gave her a piece of advice that not just shaped her 56-year marriage, but also her 3 decades of She said, in a marriage, it helps to be a little deaf. And by that she meant sometimes you just gotta let things go. Sometimes you just gotta pretend not to hear certain things. Because if you lock on to everything, you hold on to everything, you give everything a great weight and seriousness, you'll never be able to get along with someone. Because if you can't do this, you're constantly bogged down in fights with you're gonna miss the things that you do agree on. So part of maintaining a good relationship is going to be letting things go There's also a famous story about Cato in the Roman Mass. He's walking in and he gets bumped and shoved and it ends up devolving into a fight. Then afterwards he realizes how silly and foolish it was, and when the man comes to apologize, he says, I don't even remember being this is a secret to good marriage, good life, good life, conflict and grudges and grievances have to be able to let things go.
对，南芝爸爸真的有被吓到那个感觉，我觉得非常可爱。那因为在拍电影之前，你也拍过像纪录片，包这部写生拍纪录片的过程当中，听到很多还在嘲讽不出的感动。然后你上一次在拍到那个戏的时候，因为拍的分析方法和演员的表现，
There's a letter that Mark Lewis is writing to his teacher, and he says, all the gods to witness that I would now live in exile with Faustina, that's his wife, rather than without her on the palanquin. He's saying that he'd rather be with his wife anywhere than in a palace by himself. And it's a beautiful idea that the tragedy of Marcus Aurelius' life is that he didn't do this, but he spends enormous amounts of his reign away. He says, somewhere else in Meditations, that life is warfare and a journey far from home. And that was the reality of the job, and he seems to have thought that he had no choice in the matter. I guess what I'm saying is that your calendar doesn't lie, your choices don't lie. Again, we want to see these virtues now.
有发生什么事情，他然后去那边去祈祷，能够度过这个困难。你这个对事情的理解你都不懂，你以为他真的是信教？他就是一个有困难去那边去是这样，你真的对事情的理解。 不是说我说他为什么经常去那边去
一个星期就去2、3次，就是祈祷。
因为他一些事情呢可能
解决不了
对吧？
That's why on my wall in my office,
你这个呢就根本都不理解他为什么有那么大的反差动作。
No, it's a reminder that when I am saying yes to things, I'm saying no to them. And conversely, when I am saying no to other things, I'm saying yes to them. So, look, one of the realities of the human experience is change. Change is everywhere all the time. In meditation, really returns to the idea of change like over and over and over again. It's this constant awareness that everything is born from change. Because nature loves nothing more than to alter what exists and make new things like it. Because all that exists is the seed of what will emerge from it. Then one of my favorite passages is, oh, you're
他
afraid.
距离因为距离什么你根本都不知道，他就是解决不了事情。
我问他，我说
Met
那个你来
20 years ago, I can barely even wrap my head
做
around
错
this.
了，知道吗？
If you want a relationship that lasts, you're going to have to come to terms. You're going to have to
韩
ascend.
国来好几年都没回去，这是没
You're
身份。
changing, they're changing. They're constantly being remade all the time. Right? The Stoics are talking about how we never step in the same river twice. You're not in the same relationship with the same person. What I'm talking about is not just accepting change, not just embracing change, but loving change. Loving that you're both on this constant journey, that you're becoming new people. You have to fall in love with that new person.
你都不让我打了，我怎么打？
不要打，
But fighting
我这个不要打，
continue
我爱吃
to
奶
be
粉
with。that
你
person
这
as
种
well.
这么不让人家做，哪有说你？
Today we talk a lot about right, a relationship has that passion, that quality of
自己包
passion.
自己
The
吃，
Stoics
没人
actually a
包
little
给
bit
我吃。
suspicious of passion, maybe more than a little bit. They were actually opposed to what they would call the passion. Being passion's slave was something they were quite worried about, so that they thought led to a lot of mistakes. But what Stoicism is this philosophy, you have this emotion, you have this urge of desire, and it's the ability to stop and question it, to think about it, to go, hey, is this something that I want to do? Is this something I'm going to regret doing? Is this something I want to say? Is this something I regret saying? What happens in the heat of the moment, I guess, is something the Stoics were concerned about. And something we have to be concerned about. The Stoics wanted to be aware and rational, not in the throes of passion or emotion. So you could say this is in contrast to like the hopeless romantic who's, after unrequited love. I think the Stoic is approaching emotions, love included, from a more philosophical, sort of reflective place. They're concerned about not being overwhelmed, about not being caught up in the Arius Didymus, another Stoic, is talking about being wary of those excessive impulses. He said,
但是看你说这样的很牛的画面，
people blow
我
up
在
their
一个
lives,
女
they
子
blow
的
up
宣
their
传片里面，
relationships.
可能就那些
Usually
纪录
over
纪录
a
片里
few
面看
seconds
到
of pleasure or
对
a thing that in
对
retrospect they
死
wish
亡
they
的天空
hadn't
在讲
said,
的对
a
一个生
decision
活
they
中
made
发生的事
at
情。
their lowest
可
ebb
能
or
说透过
their
车
most
窗看到，
overwhelmed.
突然看到
And
在
again,
大
what
街上
Stoicism is
看到了
not
年
not
轻的朋友，
feeling
看
those
到了
things,
年轻
but
的
not letting them
然后说
make
这
you
场
do
环境
something
当中
that
要
you're
在
going
路
to
上的
regret
年轻
or
人。
that can't
我
be
简单讲
done.
讲
So look, it's good to be in love, it's good to feel love, it's good to love deeply, but you don't want to be a slave to it, you don't want to be overwhelmed to it, you don't want it to overwhelm you. Look, all good things come to an end, relationships and life included. I know this might sound a little weird to end this video, but I know you can be a little depressing, but the Stoics did meditate on ending days, meditated on life. This is not just premeditation, the idea that things could happen, and that it's the refusal to consider what percentage of time is spent in divorce, that people grow apart, that people have affairs, that people make mistakes, that life can take us
他一定在你脑海当中的
这电影好玩
是
是
有你的
I would say is to make it as
牛牛的
and
早点。
unexpected low.
他
Look, the one we know for certain is that every
你街上跟我讲，
relationship
都在往
break
分
up
配
for。one person and then eventually the other will go down. That is the human condition. And the Stoics want us to meditate on it, to be aware of it, to not be surprised by it. Epictetus said that whenever there's things that you love or that bring you pleasure and joy, he says, remember to
这个妈妈有节费的，如果老空气有节费的。
heart eventually will leave you. he even says
按摩
it's
摸
Marxist
呗，
solstice that when you kiss your child at night, when you say goodnight to your wife, he says, say to yourself that you are kissing something soon, and that they may not make it to the morning. Now, the purpose of this was not to
知道拍一年了，这个对
I think it was to be present, to say, hey, this bedtime matters. Hey, this conversation in the car matters. Hey, this walk matters. Hey, this phone call, this text message matters. It's not supposed to be grim. It's supposed to make you present. It's supposed to make you connected. And yeah, it's hard, Marcus Aurelius, because it feels like
他
tempting
这个
to
度也
face
比较大，
something
很好
that's
包。
lost. It feels almost sacrilegious as a parent to consider that something could happen to your
这
kid.
5块钱一花生，这一花生我们家里都
happens
有，
is outside our
怎么能
control.
更
How
便宜？
prepared we
只
are.
要一半钱。
不是维生素掉，不然会坏掉。
你去买了要5万
To
钱
shrug，off something bad if it happens.
就是你自己包啊。
Designed to make you live and be present and love in such a way that you have less to regret
你
on
不
the
是不
other
说为什么你不帮我？
你分2个人爱吃的。
就是猪年，身体会好哦。你吃的你跟年轻都不好。他说住呢，像你现在智商更严重，我们就压下去。哎，他一根树走树一晃的，这块智商开始怀。
Look, nobody wants to be passive, nobody wants to be weak, no one wants to be kicked around by life. And certainly the ancient Stoics didn't either. The Stoics were masters of the universe. The Stoics lived in Greece when it ruled the world. The Stoics lived in Rome when it ruled the world. Marcus Aurelius was literally the most powerful person on the planet. I'm Ryan Holiday, I'm the author of The Daily Stoic, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. How Stoicism can help you master your environment, master your life, master yourself. Stoic strategies for power, Stoic strategies for success, Stoic strategies for making a dent in the universe, because I know that's what you're trying to do, because that's what we're all trying to do. So let's get into it. The one thing a leader can never say, can never excuse anyone in their organization saying is, I did not think that would happen. You have to be prepared. The Stoics practice premeditatio malorum. They think about what might happen. They're prepared for what might happen. Seneca says the unexpected blow lands most heavily. He says, you must rehearse them in your mind. Exile, war, torture, shipwreck. Be ready for them. Have a plan for them. Know that stuff outside your control is going to happen. But what matters is how you respond to what happens. And part of how you respond is how you prepare before it's even happened.
没有关系。
Marcus Aurelius, one of the great
可是
leaders of
常
all
常觉得
time,
东西
what
很贵。
advice does
我
he
昨天
have
看
for
那个
aspiring
那个
leaders
顶点，我
for
叫他
leaders
自己
today?
转，
He
我叫他
encourages
自己
Ananias to
转。
listen to experts and when not to
昨天啊。
listen to experts. He
你请他
is
吃了。
convinced
我没有
that
请
the
他吃，
power he's been
叫他
given
买。
has to be used for good. He says we're here for each other. He says know what is enough, right? That to be craving more and more always brings about ruin. He says that you have to tie your success to your effort, to tie your ambition to what other people say or do. He says this is insanity and it will ruin you and break you. And then finally, he says you have to do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. That's the
哇，
job
就是
of
有
the
点
leader, is to
冰。
make the hard decisions. Sometimes you're going to piss people off. Sometimes you're going to have to hurt a few feelings. But the leader does the right thing because it's the right thing. End of story. The famous dictum from Lord Acton is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What's remarkable about Marcus Aurelius is that he's perhaps the only exception to this rule that we know. He's given absolute power. What is the first thing he does with it? He gives half of it away to his stepbrother. It's a remarkable testament to the power of this philosophy.
那你去健身啊，他也叫你健身。他说，如果你要看孙子，你要去健身。他有关。
你有没有叫他去上工作了？
没有，他就叫我多投，他叫我去做英语老师在中国。那就没房子住，租房子。
Famous name that we inherited. You're not special. The rules do apply to you. You're not better than anyone else. Power doesn't have to corrupt. What it can do is reveal. It can reveal who you actually are. We think that being really rich, being really powerful, having an important job, that this is going to free up our lives, right? We even call it financial freedom. But it's important, the Stoics would say, that we look at the actual lives of the people that we're aspiring to be like. There's this haunting scene I tell it in Lives of the Stoics. Posidonius, one of the great Stoics, is there for the death of Marius. Marius being one of the richest and most powerful of the Roman generals. And he watches this man who commanded these great legions, but as Seneca said, those legions commanded him. He wasn't in control of his life, he wasn't in control of himself, and it was a miserable, lonely way to go. And so it's important that you study the lives of the rich and famous, as they say, not because celebrity gossip is interesting, but because you get a glimpse of what it's actually like to be those people, to have those things. And it's not as empowering as you think it is. Ernest Renan said of Marcus that Marcus was probably the least free of all men. That's why Marcus didn't love being emperor. He didn't have control over his schedule, over his life, what people said about him. His private life is gone. It wrecks his family in many ways. So it's really important that we study. We ask ourselves, is getting this thing actually going to give me what I want? Or am I fooling myself that someday in the future by having it, it's not how it's going to work? You're not going to be successful because you haven't defined what success is. You haven't really thought about where you're trying to go. Seneca says that if you don't know what port you're sailing towards, no wind is favorable. If you don't take the time to really go, where am I trying to go? What does that look like? Why am I interested in that? Why is that important? Is that in my control? You're not going to be able to make the individual day-to-day, part-by-part decisions that will allow you to actually get there. You won't know how to respond properly to the things, the opportunities, and to the obstacles that you face along the way. So neither Odysseus or his son Telemachus would have survived the Odyssey were it not for some help. Odysseus is helped by Athena, but Telemachus is helped by Athena in human form. And whose form does she take? It's an old family friend named Mentor. I think this is rather revealing. Basically, Odysseus and Telemachus are a product of the mentorship of this God who is looking out for them. And of course, all of us are a product of our mentors. Zeno wouldn't have discovered philosophy without Crates. Marcus Aurelius couldn't have been a philosopher king without his philosophy teachers, yes, but also without Antoninus, who mentors him for 20 years. I would not be here without the mentorship of Robert Greene. Not all of us have gods in our lives, but mentors can serve as a kind of godlike figure. Why would we want to learn from experience what we can learn from the experiences of others? We want to benefit from the hard-won wisdom of those who have gone before us, those who know more than us. And this is a super powerful lesson from the Odyssey. And of course, it is a reminder of the power of mentors and mentorship. People say they want things to be calm, they want things to be easy, they want to have time. They claim that they want success, they claim that they hate stress, but then look at their choices. Look at your choices. Do you really mean it? In one of his letters, Seneca talks about people who choose to plunge headlong into the middle of the flood. He's referring to people whose lives are filled with needless drama, with conflict, with busyness, with chaos and dysfunction. Sure, a Stoic should be able to endure difficult circumstances. We should be able to manage stress, but we shouldn't choose stress. We shouldn't add stress on top of the stress that life throws our way. I think about Elon Musk. Here's a guy with multiple kids, multiple companies. He's doing really important stuff. So why does he wake up every day and choose violence on Twitter? Why does he wake up every day and plunge into the flood of division and culture war nonsense? Why does he add stress on top of the stress? And there's a cost to this, right? The lawsuits, the reputational damage, the muddling of the message. If you read Walter Isaacson's biography of Musk, you get a sense that this guy's not actually having any fun while he's doing it. He's even described how no one would actually trade places with him if they knew what it was like. He says, my mind is a storm. But his life is also a storm by choice. He chooses storm on top of storm. And this prevents him from being more successful than he could be, and it also prevents him from enjoying said success. So yeah, sure, he's very rich, but his life sucks. And we have to think about that. Why are we choosing violence? Why are we choosing stress if serenity and peace and contentment and clarity is our goal? Why do our choices, why do our social media habits, why does our media diet say something very different? I've got a long commute these days. My kids go to school pretty far away from us. My wife and I have been trying to fill that time productively. one of the things we've been doing is listening to masterclasses, because what masterclass does is take the best experts in the world, distill their expertise, their experiences down into digestible, bite-sized lessons, but you don't just have to watch masterclasses. You can listen to them in audio-only mode in the car. I actually recorded a masterclass myself last fall on how to apply philosophy to modern life. It was amazing to see the production that goes into it, the experts they bring in to help you get your best lessons out there. Masterclass has a bunch of great offers now for the holidays, sometimes as much as up to 50% off. You can head over to masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday for the current offer. That's right, up to 50% off Masterclass at masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday. For great holiday gifts and, of course, for learning yourself, go to masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday. The secret to success is very simple, Marcus Aurelius says in his meditations. You just have to concentrate on this thing in front of you. He says, concentrate on it like a Roman. He says, do what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness. He says, do it tenderly, do it willingly, do it with justice. And then he says, do it like it is the last thing you are doing in your life. Simple to say, hard to do, right? Concentration is so difficult in this noisy, busy modern world. You are on your phone right now. You are sitting on a computer right now. You are not focusing. You are not doing the thing in front of you. You are not doing it like it's the last thing you are doing in your life. You're doing it like you'll get another million shots at it. You're doing it like it's not important. You are doing it like it doesn't matter. And then you're wondering why you're not making the progress that you want to make. The benefits of Stoicism are clear. It offers resilience, it offers fortitude, it offers courage, it offers productivity and focus and self-command. This is all great, and these are the reasons people have been talking about and sharing the ideas in Stoicism for thousands of years. Because it works, because it makes you better. But it's important that we don't miss that for all that Stoicism offers, it also asks a lot of us. It doesn't just ask a lot of us in terms of deprivation and hard work. It asks a lot of us morally and ethically. Just that you do the right thing, Marcus Aurelius says in Meditations. The rest doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're cold or warm, tired or well-rested. It doesn't matter if people recognize or appreciate it. There were Stoics who gave their lives for these abstract notions of courage and discipline, and most of all, justice and wisdom. So Stoicism asks a lot of us. It asks that we be a good person. It asks that we be principled. It asks that we be kind. It asks that we be public-oriented, that we do works for the common good. So if your attraction to Stoicism is all the things that it does for you, and you ignore what it asks of you, you're just using it to become a better sociopath. And that's not who the Stoics were, and that's certainly not who they wanted you to be. You can't pick and choose. Stoicism is a well-rounded philosophy that yes, offers a lot to us, but it also asks a lot of us. There's a Stoic named Helvidius, who's a senator in the time of Vespasian, and he's quite critical of Vespasian, and Vespasian doesn't like it. He calls Helvidius aside and says, you must stop this. And Helvidius says, look, you may have the power to remove me from the Senate, but as long as I'm in the Senate, he says, I have to go in and do and say what I think is right. It's my job. And Vespasian says, if you don't stop, I'll kill you. And he says to Vespasian, the man who has power of life and death over him, he says, I'll do my job and you do yours. So this decision to get involved, to speak up, to do what's right, to insist on what's right, to fight for not just your rights, but the rights of others, this is where the virtues come together. Today's quote from the Daily Stoic is, often injustice lies in what you aren't doing, not only what you are doing. This goes to that famous quote that's now a sort of a common expression, that the only thing that evil needs to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Yes, other people might be committing the injustice, but if you don't say anything, if you don't try to stop it, if you just go along with it, then you are complicit in it happening. There is only one rule.
in life. And it's, God damn it, you gotta be kind. That's the great Kurt Vonnegut. I love that line. And it's not just a rule, it is a way of living. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said, everyone we meet is an opportunity for kindness. That's why I don't understand this backlash against political correctness, against wokeness. Sure, some of these things are annoying, and maybe they're a little excessive. But I'm not sure how the solution to that is being an asshole, is being unkind, is embracing cruelty, is celebrating people who treat other people shitty. It's a violation of the one rule of life. It is a violation of the one thing that good people do, which is practice empathy, which is care about how their actions affect other people, which is care about what is going on with other people. Elon Musk said recently that he thinks the fatal flaw of Western civilization is empathy. That's fucking nonsense. That is insane. That's the kind of thing that a sociopath says, that a psychopath says. Stoicism is not a recipe for making you care less about other people.
Magnolia boy down Blastoise.
The ability to regulate your own emotions, your own feelings, so you can care and think about other people. So you can follow this one great rule from Kurt Vonnegut, which is be kind, treat other people well. More than any other topic in meditations, what does Marcus Aurelius talk about? It's not about emotional regulation. It's not about self-control or self-command. The thing that Marcus Aurelius talks about 80 times in meditations is our interconnectedness, the idea of a common good. And we can imagine him coming to Athens, which he does later in life as part of his pursuit of philosophy, getting up to the Acropolis or one of these hills and looking down at what would have then been only an ancient city. And yet it was also a modern city full of people very different than him, people who he disagreed with on a lot of things, people who he had to make hard decisions about, and yet he's reminding himself over and over again that we're put here for each other, that he's not a citizen of Rome, he's a citizen of the world. Today globalism has become this sort of slur, but we have to be globalists. The distinctions about where you're born don't fucking matter. When you get up from a high enough view, when you look at Earth from space, that you don't see the borders, they don't exist, right? No, we're all cut from the same thing, the Stoics. We're all part of this larger whole, and we have an obligation to each other, and we have to treat each other well. We have to treat each other right. It's good character and works for the common good, Marcus Aurelius said. That's what life is about. Over and over and over again, the Stoics talk about our interconnections with each other. That's what it's about. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr., he says, obviously we're using the tools of persuasion. He says, but we're also using the means of coercion. People think that causes that succeed because they're just right. They think that the way to bring them into the world is just to have really compelling arguments about why it's true or why their way of doing things is better. What Martin Luther King understood more than any activist of his generation, perhaps of all time, is the power of leverage. The Montgomery bus boycott was a show of force. He nearly bankrupted the bus company. He was applying continual and relentless pressure. He understood fundamentally that black people outnumbered white people in the South. And he understood that every single one of them that registered to vote then had leverage and power over the politicians, over the laws that were oppressing him. So yes, he spoke beautifully, he spoke powerfully, he was morally correct, but he also understood leverage, he understood power, right? He understood, as Robert Greene says in the 48 Laws of Power, that you don't appeal to mercy or gratitude, you appeal to self-interest. You apply power and coercion in addition to persuasion, and that's what made Martin Luther King not just morally correct, but it's what allowed him to succeed and change the world. The only reason to study philosophy, the Stoics said, was to become a better person. Nietzsche said that all that other kind of philosophy is just a critique of words by other words. The point of philosophy to the Stoics was to be a better person, to contribute to a better world. It's not just complex ideas, it's not just big words, it's not just a bunch of names of philosophers you can't pronounce, it's not just a bunch of dead old white guys. It's a vibrant philosophy designed to help you practically with the problems of life. It feels gross, right? Like, not just that we take something like Thanksgiving
for Christmas, and we make it all about commercialism, materialism, buying stuff. But there's all this pressure, right? As a small business, this is my bookstore here in Texas, like, what's your Black Friday sale? What's your Cyber Monday sale? What deals do you have? I was just getting so grossed out by it, and I hated it, that a couple of years ago, my wife Samantha and I just decided we weren't going to participate in it at all. And not only were we not going to participate, we're going to do the opposite, which is to say we were going to use 2 of the best sales days of the year, not to sell stuff, but to do stuff for other people. So this year, like we've done every year for the last 5 years, for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, we don't want you to buy anything from us. Instead, we want you to donate money to Feeding America. Over the last 5 years, we've raised close to $1 million or 10 million meals for people who are hungry. All of this being extra relevant this year with the whole stuff about SNAP benefits and the government shutdown. If you want to participate, just go to dailystoic.com/feeding. $1 provides up to 10 meals for people in need. My wife and I and Daily Stoic donated the first $30,000. That gets us 10% of the way to our goal. We'd like to get to $300,000. All you got to do is donate a little bit of money to dailystoic.com/feeding. When I wrote The Daily Stoic 8 years ago, I had this crazy idea that I would just keep it going. The book was 366 meditations, but I'd write one more every single day and I'd give it away for free as an email. I thought maybe a few people would sign up. Couldn't have even comprehended a future in which 750,000 people would get this email every single day, and would for almost a decade. If you want to get the email, if you want to be part of a community that is the largest group of Stoics ever assembled in human history, I'd love for you to join us. You can sign up and get the email totally for free, no spam. You can unsubscribe whenever you want at dailystoic.com/email. Stoicism is almost 2,500 years old. It's older than most countries, it's older than some religions. It's basically tried and tested wisdom, ideas that have been put through the furnace of human experience for some 25 centuries. It's also something I've been writing and talking and thinking about for going on 20 years now. Just a tiny bit of that very long tradition. But the problems from 25 centuries ago are not that different than the problems from today. We're burned out, we're distracted, we're tempted, we're frustrated, we're afraid. Stoicism has a lot to teach us about these things, and this is what we talk about here at Daily Stoic in the videos we do and the emails we do and the books that I write. And so today we're looking back at some of the most impactful things we've done here at Daily Stoic over the last year. Stoic ideas that resonated in 2025, but have their roots back in the 4th century BC and the 2nd century AD and all that time between, and ideas that I think are going to hold up well going into 2026 and that you'll want to apply in your own life. All fools have this one thing in common. All losers have this one thing in common. What is it? Seneca says it's that they're always getting ready to start. He says they're always delaying to live. There's actually a theme throughout the writings of the Stoics. You could be good today, Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations. He says, but you choose tomorrow. This is the resistance. It's this thing that gets between us and what we want to do, what we're capable of doing. It's the reasons we have for putting stuff off. It's all the preparation we say we have to do. It's all the things we have to handle first. It's the conditions we're waiting for. It's, as we said during the pandemic, when things go back to normal, or we say when the kids are out of the house, when the weather is better, when I'm recovered. No, this is what fools do. This is the biggest lie in the world. We don't say I'm never going to do it. We say I'm going to do it later. We say I'm going to do it in the morning. We say I'm going to do it tomorrow. Don't. Do it now. Not later. Do it now. Get started. Stop delaying to live. Stop putting it off. Do what you can while you can. Look, there's a secret to not getting upset, to not getting angry, to not getting offended, to not being bothered, to focus and to concentration. And it's simple. It comes to us from Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor. He said, you always have the power to have no opinion. He says, things are not asking to be judged by you. Don't turn this into something. The fewer opinions you have, the fewer judgments you make, the more you're able to just leave things as they are, the happier you will be, the more productive you will be, the more focused you will be, and the easier you will be to get along with.
There's a Marcus Aurelius quote I'm sure you know. I lost this wife of 60 years, and
I'm so sorry.
It's sort of devastating, but there was a Marcus Aurelius quote that really, I don't know it literally, but you'll know it. If you lose a loved one, honor her, and in a sense try to be more like her, and then she'll live in your actions. And so my wife was very good, and I just try to be like her. And when I try to be like her, like she was very, if someone was alone or sick or something, she'd call them up, be comforting to them, and I'm not like that, So I started to do that. People that I know, some guys my age who have no grandchildren, are just there, and call them up and say, how are you, and being like her.
Yeah.
And they were so pleased and so kind, and so I keep my wife in my life with Marcus Aurelius' advice by trying to be more like her.
7 things you should do every day according to the ancient Stoics. Number 1, you gotta wake up early. The most famous passage in Meditations is Marcus Aurelius struggling to get out of bed at dawn. He says, I have to go to work as a human being. He says, I'm not meant to huddle under the covers and stay warm. No, I'm put here to do things, to make things, to be of service to people, to make the world a better place. And you were not meant to huddle under the covers and stay warm either. So get up early and get after it. Number 2, you gotta exercise. You have to be active. And now, we're not exercising for vanity purposes. We're not building muscles so we can look jacked, right? We are trying to cultivate strength, physical and mental. Seneca said we treat the body rigorously so that it's not disobedient to the mind. We are cultivating discipline. When you think of a philosopher, you don't think of an athlete, but in the ancient world, many of them were. Chrysippus was a runner. Cleanthes was a boxer. Marcus Aurelius was a wrestler. I run and swim and bike. The point is, get active, get moving. You need a strong mind in a strong body, and that means doing it every day. Number 3, if you're not journaling, you are not practicing Stoicism. Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, all the ancient Stoics praised the benefits of journaling. Putting it down on the page, working it out on the page. That is to say, instead of on other people, instead of just having it pinging around inside your head. You gotta be reflecting, you gotta be analyzing, you gotta be exploring. You have to be repeating over and over again the lessons from the ancients and the values you are trying to apply in your life. How does Marcus Aurelius become Marcus Aurelius? Through his journal. We see in Meditations Marcus Aurelius fighting to be the person that philosophy tried to make him. He is journaling as an active philosophical practice, which you must do also. Number 4, you have to be reading, not a little bit, but all the time. We must linger on the works of the master thinkers, Seneca said. Over and over again, we have to return to them. The Stoics aren't something you have read. They are something you need to be reading all of your life. And in fact, there is no good life without study and reflection and wisdom. You have to read, and not just read, but read actively, read strenuously. As Epictetus says, it's not enough to read, you have to read the right things in the right way. Number 5, go for a walk. I'm not saying walking will solve all your problems. I'm saying very few of your problems will be made worse for walking. Seneca said we need to take these wandering outdoor walks so that the mind can be nourished and refreshed by open air and deep breathing. It calms you down, it gets you out of your head, it gets you out of your room, it gets you outdoors, into the world, into the beauty of the natural world. It gets your mind moving. It will make you better. Number 6, make time for some deep work and focus and reflection. In Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, he says you have to concentrate on this task before you like a Roman. So do it like it's the last thing you're doing in your life. I would say do it like it's the only thing in your life. Put the phone away, close all the tabs in your browser, don't multitask, lock in and focus for a large, uninterrupted block. This is what Marcus Aurelius is doing in Meditations. This is what the Stoics were doing in their philosophical classes, right? Stop drifting about, stop wandering, and focus. 7, finally, you have to think about death. Memento mori. You are mortal. You don't have forever. It's not that life is short, Seneca says. It's that we waste a lot of it. And we waste a lot of it because we think we have more of it than we actually do. The clock is ticking away. Your time here is evaporating at this very second. Don't fool yourself into thinking you have forever. Don't be good tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius says, be good today, be good now, because it's the only thing you have for certain. One thing we can all agree on is that wisdom isn't something you're born with, right? It's something that you have to acquire. And you obviously acquire it having experiences out in the world, but one of the most important ways we acquire wisdom is from teachers, by going to school literally and figuratively. And that's where today's sponsor comes in, Masterclass. It is the best way to learn from the best to become your best. I even made a masterclass on how to apply philosophy to modern life. It was amazing to see the production that goes into it, the experts they bring in to help you get your best lessons out there. With plans starting at $10 a month, billed annually, you get unlimited access to over 200 classes. And Masterclass has a bunch of great offers now during the holidays, sometimes as much as 50% off. And if you head over to masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday right now, you'll get the current best offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday. Masterclass.com/Ryan Holiday. Show me who you spend time with, and I will show you who you are. Right? It's a great expression. It's this idea that we become like the people we spend the most time with. But I think it's true not just for people, but for information. What does your information diet look like? Who are you spending time with? Who are you giving access to your brain? In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says our soul is dyed by the color of our thoughts. You know, we're dyed by the inputs, by the things that we allow access to. So if you're spending all your time on social media, if you're following nothing but breaking political news and opinion, if you're dwelling on things that are inconsequential or superficial or materialistic, you're going to become dyed and changed by that. But if you spend time with the wisest and smartest people who ever lived, if you look backwards to history, if you surround yourself with great books and great ideas and great people, you can become like that too. Your problem is that you want the third thing. Your problem is that you think you're entitled to the third thing. Okay, what is that third thing? Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, says that you did something good, you did something nice, and someone benefited from that. That's 1 and 2. And the third thing is the wanting of the recognition, the thanks, the gratitude, the appreciation, perhaps even the compensation. The problem with the third thing is that the third thing is not in our control. Doing the good, making sure the good is received, that's in our control. But then whether they thank us, whether they recognize us, whether they appreciate us, whether they spare us, whether they pay us back in kind, that's not up to us. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. You do the nice thing because it's the nice thing. You do the kind thing because it's the kind thing. You do it because that's who you are. If you get the extra on top, that's great, but it can't be why you did it. It can't be what you did it for, and it can't be your expectation. The problem is mostly in the expectation, because that's what's setting you up for disappointment, for frustration, and bitterness. 8 things the Stoics want you to stop doing right now. Number 1, you gotta stop caring about what people think. Marcus Aurelius didn't give a fuck. He said, why do I care about the sounds of hands hitting together, the clacking of tongues? He says, why do I need to be remembered by stupid people in the future, an experience I won't even be able to enjoy? He says, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but for some reason we value their opinions more than our own. Number 2, you have to stop putting stuff off. Seneca says that procrastination robs us of the present by promising us the future. It says we're going to do it later. It says we'll be good tomorrow. Don't be good tomorrow, the Stoics say. Be good today. Number 3, you have to stop doing so much. You have to be able to say no. You have to ask yourself, the Stoics say, is this thing essential? Because most of what we do and say, Marcus Aurelius reminds us, is not essential. And when we eliminate the inessential, we get the double benefit doing the essential things better. Number 4, stop having so many opinions. This is a power that you have. You always have the power to have no opinion, Marcus Aurelius says in Meditations. He reminds himself not to turn this into something, which leads us to number 5, which is you have to stop getting offended. It's not things that upset us. Epictetus says it's our opinion about things. You have decided that this remark is rude. You have decided that this remark is inappropriate. You can also decide, as Marcus Aurelius said, to let it go, to not have an opinion about it. Number 6, stop being a know-it-all. It is impossible to learn that which you think you already know. This is what the Stoics tell us. Conceit is the enemy. Ego is the enemy. If you think you know everything, you cannot learn anything else. Which leads us to number 7. Stop talking so much. Just shut the fuck up. Right? 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That was the dictum of Zeno, the founder of Stoicism. And finally, number 8. Stop acting like you're going to live forever. Time is running out. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. Consider that you could die tomorrow. That's why you have to stop procrastinating. You could leave life right now, the Stoics say. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Because death isn't something that happens in the future. Death is happening now. Every second that passes, the Stoics remind us, belongs to death. The time you just spent watching this video, the time you spent laying in bed this morning, the time you spent putting things off, the time you spent thinking about other people's opinions, the time you spent getting offended, the time you spent doing things you had no business doing, you paid for that with your life. You wasted your life on it. So stop. Stop doing that. And stop doing all 8 of these things right now. Stoicism demands it. You can't be satisfied just getting the gist of something. You have to read and study deeply to return to the same books over and over again. And actually, Marcus, quoting the philosopher Heraclitus, would say that we never step in the same river twice. I'm Ryan Holiday. I've written a number of books about Stoic philosophy. I've spoken to the NBA, the NFL, studying senators and special forces leaders. Almost 15 years now, I have been reading and rereading one of the greatest books of all time, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Actually, this is my new leather edition that I have made. I put so many miles on this one and my other copies that I wanted something to really stand the test of time. Marcus Aurelius didn't read a book once and think that he got it. He read it over and over and over again. I probably read Meditations 100 times. I was reading it just yesterday, and in today's video, I want to give you 100 lessons that I've gotten from my hundreds of reads of Meditations over the last decade, and I hope they're of use to you, and I hope most of all that you go pick this book up and read it yourself. One of the most compelling and jaw-dropping parts of Meditations comes at really the beginning, the opening of book 2. But book 1 is Debts and Lessons. I'll talk more about that later. He says, today the people you will meet will be jealous and stupid and annoying and frustrating. He lists all the things that people are going to be like today. And part of this is just the Stoic idea of being prepared, right? The unexpected blow lands heaviest. If you think people are going to be amazing and kind and get out of your way and you're going to only hit green lights, you're going to be sorely disappointed. But he says the point is not to think about how shitty and awful people are. Not at all. You have to realize why they are like this. He says it's because they don't know good from bad. They don't have the same training as you, but they are still like you. He said you cannot allow them to implicate you in their ugliness. He says we were meant to work together. We are brothers and sisters. And so what Meditations begins with this seemingly depressive note, but if you stick with it, and I think that's such an important lesson that you get from reading Marcus over and over again, if you stick with him, you realize that beneath this honesty, this bluntness, this matter-of-factness, is a huge, caring heart a heart that will not allow itself to harden or be turned against other people. In one passage in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius writes down what he calls epithets for the self. He talks about being honest, he talks about being upright. These are words, he says, that he can live by. A couple different times in my life I've tried to do that, but part of one of the Daily Stoic challenges a few years ago, I wrote down 7 of them. I wrote honest, calm, fair, father, brave, generous, and still. These are words that I try to live by. I want to make decisions, take actions that will demonstrate that ideal, which will show that those are the watchwords or the epithets that I live by, that I could be described by. And so I think of all the exercises in meditation, that's one that we can all practice, is just come up with the epithets for the self, the rules, the descriptors for your character that you want to live and model day in and day out. But really the true opening of Meditations is the debts and lessons section. Almost a full 10% of the book is Marcus Aurelius writing what he learned from and what he was grateful for, and the people who trained him, the people who raised him. The fact that 10% of the book is gratitude, to me, is so important. It's a statement of priorities and the role that gratitude must play in our life. Nothing is so inspiring as remembering the values and virtues, seeing them embodied in the people around you. He never knew Meditations would be published. This wasn't for the other people to see that he was grateful to them. It was actually the act of expressing the gratitude that was a gift to him, and we have to have an active gratitude practice in our own lives. One of my favorite stories about Marcus Aurelius, not in Meditations, but at the depth of the Antonine Plague, he sells off the palace furnishings to pay down Rome's debt, which actually does connect to something in Meditations. He talks about how lucky he feels that he's never had to ask anyone else for financial help, and whenever anyone else came to him asking for financial help, he was always in a position to say yes. He was a generous, a kind person. Yes, he was privileged and wealthy and powerful. He tried to use those things for good. He tried to absorb the blows or the pain or the difficulties before other people. This is a print I have from one of my favorite passages from Marcus Aurelius. I have it on the wall. Sell in the Daily Stoic Sermon. He says, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. I think arguably Marcus Aurelius' greatest contributions to philosophy are not what he wrote in this book, right? What Marcus's greatest contributions to philosophy is how he lived. That even if he had never written a philosophical work, that he'd still be seen as a kind of philosopher king, because he embodied the ideas, he lived them, he demonstrated that a king, an emperor, a person of power, influence, or wealth could be good and decent, could do the right thing, could be everything that people expected of him. And that's just, to me, the most important thing we can take from Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius says that no matter what's happening in the world, no matter what other people are doing to us, we always have this superpower. We always have the power to have no opinion. We don't have to decide that it's good or bad. We don't have to decide that it's urgent or not. We don't have to decide anything about it, or we don't have to think anything about it at all. We can just let it go and let it pass by. You don't have to figure it out. You don't have to have a hot take on it. Just let the weather be the weather. This political situation be that political situation. It doesn't have to be good or bad. We don't have to have an opinion about everything. One of my first reads of Meditations, I noted that Marcus says, you can only ruin your life if it ruins your character. The idea that success wasn't whether you made money, whether you got what you wanted, it's whether you protected your character. Right? Jesus says, what good is gaining the whole world if you lose your soul? And we can imagine Marcus struggling with this as the emperor of Rome. It doesn't matter how many buildings he builds or what lands he conquers. To him, it matters if he is a good person or not. I remember shortly after I read Meditations for the first time, I had to get on a flight. I was in the middle seat on this long cross-country flight, and I was next to someone who was jostling for the armrest. The person in front of me reclined back. And it was just one of those unpleasant experiences in modern travel. But I thought back to one of my favorite passages in Meditations, where Marcus talks about being next to a smelly person. He says, yeah, it's awful. You can say something to them if you want. But if you're not going to say something, then you just have to bear it. No amount of gritting your teeth or silently resenting them is going to change this. Stewing doesn't help them or you. Being miserable doesn't help them or you. You're just going to carry this nastiness with you when you go. And so I think Marcus would have dealt with the same kinds of inconveniences and annoyances as all of us, even if his life was more sheltered than most of ours. But he reminded himself, this is what life entails. You either say something about it, or you got to get comfortable putting up with it. One of Marcus Aurelius' most brilliant rhetorical questions is this. He says, is a world without shameless people possible? The answer is, of course, no. And he says, okay, so you met one of them. right? This person that you meet, they're one of those people. You know that it's impossible for the world to exist without them. You know inevitably, statistically, you will run into one of them. That's it. He says, reminding yourself that this person is one of a certain number helps you not get so upset about it, not be so surprised by it, and most of all, not despair by it. Most people are the opposite of that person. And I think for the word shameless, we can plug in all sorts of things. People who lie, people who steal, people who cheat, people who do all the things that we don't like. A certain percentage of them are always going to exist and always have existed. And better yet, when we remind ourselves still that they are the minority, we can find a way to categorize them, accept them, and then move on. A couple of years ago, I wrote this book, Conspiracy. Peter Thiel was outed as gay by this Silicon Valley gossip rag that treated him very cruelly, and he spent millions of dollars and years of his life plotting and scheming to destroy it, which he successfully did. And there's a lot that was really interesting in it, a lot that was really innovative in doing that. I think even some things to be impressed by it, as I was talking about in the book. Every day as I was writing it, I couldn't help but think of one of my favorite lines from Meditations. Marcus Aurelius says, and the best revenge is to not be like your enemy. And the point is that getting even often makes you like or worse than the person who supposedly did this grievous, heinous thing to you. We see this in Marcus Aurelius' life. He's betrayed by one of his most trusted generals, and he tries not to be angry about it. He has to deal with it, yes, but he tries to actually use it as an opportunity to show the Roman people how one deals with being betrayed, how one deals with civil strife. You can't let the person who wronged you turn you into something just like that. Gregory Hayes, in his translation of Meditations, he makes a great point, and I missed it the first couple of times. He says that nowhere does Marcus identify as a Stoic. And he says, actually, if you asked Marcus, he probably wouldn't have identified with any school at all, even though Meditations is, of course, filled with all sorts of Stoic observations and principles. He says that Marcus would have identified as a philosopher. Paul Graham, in one of his famous essays, says, keep your identity small. Don't identify as a singular thing or with a singular ideology. You want to be a free agent. This is why Seneca quotes so much from Epicurus. He read widely, he understood widely. The point is not to be a Stoic philosopher. The point is to be a philosopher, a lover of wisdom. There's a beautiful line in Joseph Brodsky's essay about the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome. It dates back to Marcus's time, but the base of which was redesigned by Michelangelo. Brodsky says something like, if Marcus Aurelius is antiquity, it is we who are the ruins. And I don't know what that means exactly. There's something beautiful and haunting about it. Maybe it's this idea that when you read Meditations, you can't help but be struck by classical beauty and perfection, in some ways the highest expression of human greatness. And then you look at us, you look at the way we talk to each other, you look at the things we say, you look at how we live and act and think, and you go, yeah, we're the old, worn out, beaten down, falling apart things. The ancient world feels fresh and modern and new and perfect in so many ways. And I just love that idea. If Marcus Aurelius is antiquity, it is we who are the ruins. It's actually in book 6 that I found the meditation that I would build my own first book of Stoic philosophy around. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He says, look, stuff can get in the way. You can be impeded. He says, but nothing can impede your intentions or your dispositions. He says, the mind can convert to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. That's the power of Stoicism, that we always have the opportunity to practice a virtue. We don't choose where we are, we don't choose what's happening, but if you accept the obstacle and work with what you're given, Marcus Aurelius says in Meditations, an alternative will present itself. Another piece of what you're trying to assemble, action by action. Acceptance can seem like this weakness, that it's stopping you from moving forward. In fact, acceptance means this door is closed, now I can go try this other door. You first have to accept that the obstacle exists, that it is real, that it has constraints or impediments or difficulties, to then decide what you're going to do about it. You're going to go around, you're going to go over, you're going to use the weight of it against itself. It's an opportunity to do this other thing that couldn't have done under ordinary circumstances. That acceptance is not passive resignation, it's the first step in taking an active approach. And Marcus returns to this theme over and over and over again in Meditation. In one passage he says, a strong stomach digests what it eats. A fire turns what you throw on top of it into flame and brightness and heat. His point is we can use our obstacles as fuel. The things that happen to us in life are opportunities. This is the essence of Stoicism. this is our chance, whatever it is. It might not be the virtue we wanted to practice, might not be the virtue we're most comfortable practicing, but it's nevertheless an opportunity to be great. I remember I was once talking to the great Robert Greene, and I asked him what one of his favorite passages from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations was. He said it was the one where Marcus Aurelius is talking about, he's looking at this big feast, and he says, oh, that's a dead bird. He said, oh, that's dead pig. Oh, this wine is rotted grapes. He said, Robert, why did you like that? He said, that's what I try to do in my writing. I try to deconstruct things, to take away the preconceived notions. It's actually what Marcus says. He says it's about stripping things of the legend that encrusts them, about seeing them as they actually are. I think that's not only what a philosopher has to do, but I think that's what a great writer like Robert Greene does. I call this contemptuous expression. These things kind of loom over us. We go, oh, Harvard is so important. Look at the fancy people that go there. Look how hard it is. Look how expensive it is. But also you could look at the idiots who've graduated from Harvard, the monsters that have come out of there, right? You could be like, oh, the president's the most prestigious, important job in the world. But look at some of the people who have been president. Look how incompetent they were. You're supposed to see things for what they are. Strip them of the legend that encrusts them. See them as they are. The same goes for like some fancy car or some important position. It's not what people think it is. You have to strip it bare. You have to see it for what it is. And Marcus Aurelius was doing this even with his own purple cloak, the thing that signified he was the emperor. He said, this is just a regular cloak dyed with shellfish blood. You're seeing it as it actually was, which is such a critical practice. The famous dictum from Lord Acton is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What's remarkable about Marcus Aurelius is that he's perhaps the only exception to this rule that we know. He's given absolute power. What's the first thing he does with it? He gives half of it away to his stepbrother. He isn't corrupted. It's a remarkable testament to the power of this philosophy, the idea of what Stoicism can make a person. And that's not an accident. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius warns himself against being Caesarified, of being dyed purple, of being changed by the power and fame and money that the position has given him. And we all have to be worried about being Caesarified or dyed purple. We have to be worried about being changed by the number of followers that we have, by the promotion that we just got, by the famous name that we inherited. You're not special. The rules do apply to you. You're not better than anyone else. Power doesn't have to corrupt. What it can do is reveal who you actually are. In one point in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius tells himself to take Plato's view, to zoom out, to see things from above. He does that. He talks about how enormous armies fighting over a border, a whole country, could be not that dissimilar from a far enough view to ants fighting over a piece of food on the ground. It's beautiful and quite impressive that he could come to this point of view, because in Marcus's time, the highest he could have gotten off the ground was like a couple-story building or maybe the top of a mountain. He didn't have the access to an airplane like all of us do. He would have never seen the blue marble photo that showed Earth from space. But when you get to Plato's view, you're just reminded how inconsequential most of the things we get upset about are. And then you are also reminded of how interconnected and interdependent and together we all are. Marcus says this too, that the borders don't matter, that vast oceans don't matter. We're all in this same thing together, that we are tied together more than we like to think that we are. Pierre Hadot, one of the great scholars of Marcus Aurelius, talks about the oceanic feeling. Marcus Aurelius talks about the view from above, he talks about immensity, how all of experience gives before us. Marcus is trying to meditate on the vastness and the connectedness of everything in the world. He talks about looking at the stars and watching yourself alongside them. I think he's seeking out these kind of humbling experiences. And you could think about why that would be so important to someone who was literally the center of the universe. He wanted to remind himself that that wasn't strictly true. One of the things Marcus Aurelius does say in Meditations about the people who would have always been flattering him and telling him he's amazing, or people who would have been criticizing him or attacking him, he says, think about what they just submitted to a few minutes ago. Think about what they do in private. Think about who they actually are. When you know who they actually are, how weak they are, or how corrupted they are, petty they are, suddenly their approval, their opinion about you won't matter very much. Marcus Aurelius clearly hated all the flatterers and sycophants. The thing he hated most was the people who would say things in passing. I'm going to be honest with you. Let me be straight with you. Let me tell you what I really think. He said to say those things was actually a confession, a self-indictment. you're admitting that that's not the norm. That's not what you normally do. People should know you're going to be honest. He said, an honest person should be like the smelly goat in the room. You should know they're there the second they walk in. And nobody had to think that about Marcus. In fact, from an early age, Marcus Aurelius was named Verismus, the truest one. And we think that's because he was so unflinchingly truthful with Hadrian, his adopted grandfather, in effect, the most powerful man in Rome. Marcus just told him what he thought. He didn't hold back, and neither can you. It's clear that one of Marcus Aurelius' passions is the theater. He loves the theater, and we know this because he quotes so widely from plays. Some of those plays didn't even survive. The only surviving remnants of them are his quotes in meditation. But he would talk about going to the theater, watching a tragedy, and what this can teach us about life. He even talks about looking at your own life as a kind of play. He says if watching something in the theater would make you interested, or make you laugh, make you think, it can't make you angry in life when it happens to you. You have to cultivate this same kind of philosophical approach. Today, people might think, oh, philosophy is this intellectual pursuit. It can't possibly jive with theater or watching television, following sports. Of course it can. Marcus Aurelius was drawing from the popular art forms of his time and drawing philosophical lessons from them that he used to be better at his life, which is the purpose of all art. Speaking of the role that art can have in teaching us things, or popular culture can have in teaching us things, you consider probably the most popular dramatical rendering of Marcus is in the movie Gladiator. He's the old guy at the beginning of the movie that Joaquin Phoenix's character killed. Now, this isn't a movie explicitly based on Stoicism, and all the time you see on the internet quotes from the movie attributed to Marcus that are really only in the movie and not real. But the movie does capture, quite shockingly, the evil and the awfulness of comedy. And that question has to hover over your readings of Meditations. How can such a wise and decent and patient and philosophical person have raised such a terrible kid? It's a tricky question, and I don't have a good answer. We've talked about it before on Daily Stoic. I mean, almost all of Marcus Aurelius' children died. Commodus is his only remaining male heir. Maybe Commodus is just a psychopath and doesn't say anything about Marcus. Maybe Marcus was trapped by the traditions of his time. Antoninus, Hadrian, and the preceding emperors, they didn't have a male son, so there wasn't an issue. But it is a tricky question, and I think the overall lesson we take from this is just talking about these things, just thinking about these things, it doesn't mean you're going to be good at this really difficult thing that is raising children. That should humble us, and also, I think, even make us question some of the things that we see Marcus Aurelius talk about in Meditation. Steve Jobs learned from his father, who was a carpenter, the importance of caring about the craft, how something was done, even the parts that no one would see, like the back of a fence or the back of a drawer. That's why the inside of a massive computer is beautiful, even though your average user will never crack it open and see. Again, Meditations being a book for the author, not for the reader, is so fascinating. Marcus Aurelius is writing in Greek, not in Latin, because at that time, Greek was the language of philosophy. It was a harder but a more beautiful language. He quotes these obscure passages from philosophy. He makes these observations about grain bends or the flecks of foam on a boar's mouth. He was a beautiful writer. It was beautiful just for himself. I mean, that's one of the reasons I slaved over this edition. I just wanted it to reflect the workmanship, the craftsmanship of Meditations itself. I just always think of that lesson from Marcus and from Steve Jobs, that it doesn't matter whether other people will see it, whether it's in your journal or for publication. You have to care about what it is and how it's made. We never step in the same river twice. The river changes and we change, right? When you pick up a book for the first time, and then the second time, and the third time, maybe even the 100th time, each time you get something different out of it. I think so often we get a book and read it once, we go, I got it. Right? But that's not how it works. Stoicism is this topic you're supposed to return to over and over and over again. I put a lot of miles on my copies of Meditations over the years. Covers falling off, there's different highlighters and pens folded like almost every page at this point. As I've returned to these passages so many times, like now almost everything in it's marked up. So one of the things I've been doing recently is rereading it on a fresh copy. And I have a really special fresh copy. This is my leather-bound edition that I actually had made, which you can buy at dailystoic.com/meditation. I'm returning to Meditations now with fresh eyes. You can see all the notes that I have in here. All these things have been hitting me in a new place, in a new way, because the book is staying, it's the same translation, but the format's a little bit different. thought size is a little bit different. The moment in time is different. My experiences are different. The lessons are the same, but the lessons that I need are different. So Meditations has to be a book that you return to over and over again, one you can't be satisfied just getting the gist of. It has to be a daily practice, an ongoing practice, something you return to over and over and over again. This new one, the leather-bound edition, I think could last you your whole life. I'm really proud of this. It's so awesome. And on the back it has, I think, a wonderful encapsulation of meditation. Marcus Aurelius says, concentrate on what you have to do. Fix your eyes on it. Remind yourself that your task is to be a good human being. Remind yourself what nature demands of people, and do it without hesitation. Speak the truth as you see it, but with kindness, with humility, without hypocrisy. That's the journey I think Meditations is trying to get us all towards, one that each time we pick up the book we get a little bit closer towards. I'm really proud of this. You can check it out. It's got awesome new illustrations on each of the 12 books. It's got gilt-edged pages. It's high-quality leather, Marcus's face on the front. I think you're really going to like this. And then at the back, I wrote a biography of Marcus that I think everyone should read. So check out the new book, dailystoic.com/meditations, or get it anywhere books are sold, including my bookstore, Companion Port. In my office, I have all sorts of reminders of Marcus. I have the prints. I have this bust of him. This is a bust I have of Marcus Aurelius from the 1840s. Painting of Marcus that someone did for me. When Marcus says at the beginning of Meditations that nothing is so inspiring as seeing the virtues embodied in the people around us, I think this is also true in how you decorate your space, your house, your office, whatever. Find philosophical embodiments of these ideas, things that remind you. When I look at those things, it's just this little sort of subconscious reminder of who I want to be, how I want to live. I'm looking at the virtues being embodied around me. And that keeps me on the straight and narrow. In writing the Daily Stoic, I got to parse exact word choice of Marcus in ways that I probably ordinarily wouldn't have. One of the passages that really struck me the first time I read that, and he says, how trivial the things we want so passionately are. And I don't know, I guess I was struck by the idea that we want so passionately are. I thought that was a beautiful expression. It was actually in the midst of translating it and seeing it from a different perspective, I realized he's saying how trivial the things we want so badly are. I think there's something to be said about reading and rereading where, almost like a Talmudic scholar, you're debating what does this word mean or that word mean, or what about this or what about this meaning. There just is something about diving super deep. Sometimes the superficial, the first take you take, is the one that hits you, and sometimes it's the 50th take where you finally get it, or you get it on a level that you wouldn't have gotten before. I remember when we were translating Marcus Aurelius for Daily Stoic, there's a passage where Marcus Aurelius says, stop your whining, stop this miserable whining monkey life. I remember our editor said, monkey? Wow, is this an expression Marcus could have possibly used? Would Marcus Aurelius have even seen or known what a monkey was? And it turns out, yes. In fact, Commodus probably killed one in the Colosseum. He was a psychopath. Just the more you play and dig into the language, the more you understand. And this is why reading and rereading is so important. You just never know. Behind every word choice, it's like a whole other room to explore. It would have been my third or fourth reading of Marcus Aurelius that I caught this line. He says, you could leave life right now and let that determine what you do and say and think. It's the Stoic idea of memento mori. It's not that you will die tomorrow and you should try heroin or go to an orgy. It's that you never know when life is going to end, and so you can't take it for granted. You cannot take it for granted. Another one that I didn't get at first, Marcus Aurelius is saying to avoid imperialization, he says that indelible stain. And I didn't really know what he meant by imperialization. And that's when I saw it in another translation, I realized what he's talking about is imperialization, like the imperial system of Rome. He means to not be Caesarified, to not be corrupted by his position. So I think sometimes it's just where you are. You don't know what a certain word means, or just the intonation that you're reading about it doesn't hit you in the right way. And this is why you have to come back to things. Why you can't just be satisfied with getting the gist of something. You have to return to it over and over again because you get it in a new way. It also is why, as much as I loved the Hayes translation, why we have this edition, it's why I've read the other translations. It's why I like the Robin Waterfield annotated version, because he's bringing his perspective. He's breaking down what he sees in it, and each time you do that, you get something new. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says we have to be more like a boxer or a wrestler than a dancer. He says we have to be dug in and ready for sudden attacks. He saw life as a battle. He saw fate as being indifferent to us, but also dealing serious blows to us. And if you're not ready for it, if you think life is a dance, if you think life is fun, if you think everything's going to be all right, then, man, fortune has some real surprises in store for you. And if you look at Marcus's life, that was true. One thing after another. He was ready for it. He was dug in. He was ready for those sudden attacks. And you and I have to be also. At one point in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says, avoid false friendship at all costs. He says nothing is more painful, nothing is worse. And he knows this from experience. I tell an obstacle is the way. The story of Marcus being betrayed by Avidius Cassius, his most trusted general, one of his best friends. He declares himself emperor, essentially attempts to orchestrate a coup. Marcus Aurelius knew that although we wanted to be trusting of people, although we wanted to assume the best in people, we had to understand that people were not perfect. People could be led astray. People could have evil intentions in their heart. We have to be aware of this. We have to be prepared for it. One of my favorite lines in Meditations is this: to accept it without arrogance, to let it go with indifference. Good things happen. We get awards. We succeed. We make money. Awesome. But that doesn't say anything about you as a person. We fail. We fall short. We get criticized. Great. That doesn't say anything about you as a person. Another translation says, receive without pride, let go without attachment. Sort of even keel, not being affected, not getting too high or too low, not identifying with any of it, identifying solely with your character. Marcus Aurelius tried to do good. He tried to help as many people, but he also understood that doing the right thing, doing good things, it wasn't always going to be recognized, and it wasn't always going to be appreciated. He says in Meditations that you can't expect the third thing, being recognized, being appreciated, being thanked for what happened. You already got the thanks, he said, by doing the right thing, by feeling, by knowing that it was the right thing. Everything else, the Stoics would say, is extra. Nice to have, but it can't be why you do it. And I think often of this idea of doing the third thing. The third thing is wanting to hit the bestseller list. The third thing is wanting the thank you card. The third thing is the person coming to you and saying, I just want to let you know what that meant to me, how much it helped me. I want to pay you back. No, you do it because it was the right thing. If you get the third thing, if you get the extra, that's great. For the Stoics, that shouldn't be something you want, but most of all, it can't be something you expect, because you will be disappointed. In Book 12 of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says, it never ceases to amaze me. We love ourselves more than other people, yet we care about their opinions more than our own. I thought about this when my first book of Stoic philosophy came out. I had worked really hard on it. I knew how many copies it sold. I knew what it deserved, and there it was, not on the bestseller list. It got skunked for some inexplicable reason. And I had to remind myself, my judgment of the book is what counts. My opinion is what matters here. So often that's what we do. We like a shirt, or we like a show, or we like this, or we like what we like, and then other people say, well, that's not cool, or that's strange, or that's weird, or it's incorrect for the following reasons, and we give up our own internal sense of what we like or dislike, what's right or wrong.
这 team 打得太差了。
Sanity is tying your success to what you say and do. This is insanity. Tying it to what other people say and do. So to me, this is one of the most powerful lessons of Marcus, that even the Emperor of Rome was struggling with it, I think, shows how difficult it is to maintain that inner scorecard, that inner compass, when everyone around you is thinking or saying something differently than you. It would be a mistake to see Marcus Aurelius as perfect. He wasn't perfect because no one is perfect. He's a human being. Marcus, instead, was trying to get better. Always. Meditations was Marcus Aurelius writing notes to himself. When Marcus Aurelius warns against having a temper, or being afraid of death, or being ambitious, or any of the things that he talks about, he's not lecturing you, he's lecturing him. Probably because he just lost his temper. Probably because he struggled with that. So you don't want to see Marcus as perfect. You want to see Marcus as a fellow human being striving to be their best, just as you and I are striving to be our best. Bill Belichick, the greatest football coach in history, tells his players, do your job. For Marcus Aurelius, what is that? What is your job? Marcus Aurelius asks himself that same question in meditation. He says, what is my vocation? It is to be a good person. That's the job. At the end of the day, to be a good person, to do good things, to make a positive difference in people around you. In book 537, Marcus Aurelius says, I was a fortunate man, but at some point fortune abandoned me. And we can imagine Marcus saying this after the plague, after he's burying another child, maybe after he hears again that perhaps his wife is cheating on him, maybe his health has failed him again. Then he catches himself. Again, this is what he's doing in meditation. He's constantly catching himself. But true good fortune is what you make for yourself. Good fortune, he says, is good character, good intentions, and good actions. And I love that idea so much, right? It wasn't what was happening to him from the outside. Fortune wasn't this external thing. Good fortune, feeling good, being good. This was something that was up to him, that was inside him, and the choices that he made and the actions that he took. I was saying before that one of the things Marcus does in meditations is he quotes from playwrights or bits of lines from the theater that particularly struck him. One of my favorites, this is a lost line from the poet Euripides. He says, "And why should we be angry at the world as if the world would notice?" We don't know what this play is from, we don't know the larger context, but it's such a great Stoic line. Getting angry, being pissed off, being resentful, being bitter, the world doesn't care. It is indifferent to you and I. All we can try to do, the Stoics say, is maintain that goodness, preserve our character, focus on how we respond. One thing Marcus doesn't talk a lot about in meditations is happiness or joy. But I think that goes back to the idea that he wasn't talking about things that he didn't need help with. He's not having to remind himself that jokes are funny, that sex feels good. In fact, he's reminding himself the opposite, that sex might feel good in the moment, but it can cause regrets, complications, or problems later on. He's reminding himself of the things that he needs the most help with. Nice fancy bed is better than a hard, uncomfortable one. He doesn't need a reminder of that. Right? So meditations, as Marcus Aurelius is talking about the things that are important, but we should not take that omission as meaning anything more than that. The Stoics were happy, the Stoics had joy, the Stoics loved, and we know Marcus did these things. The Stoics were just like us. Marcus had some sense of what human flourishing or happiness was. That's just not what he was talking the most about in meditation. I think the passage that hit me most from meditation is Book 5. Marcus Aurelius talks about struggling to get out of bed in the morning. He's just like you and I, and he's saying, oh, it's so nice here under the covers. And he says, but are you meant to feel nice? To huddle under the covers and be warm? No, he said you were meant to do the work of a human being. You gotta get up, you gotta get after it. When I read that in college for the first time, it hit me so much, I taped it up on my wall. I've been thinking about it ever since. My friend Stephen Pressfield talks about the resistance, the thing that gets in between us and what we want to do. He says, nobody says, I'm never going to write my symphony. He says, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius struggles with the resistance too, like all of us. He says, you could be good today, instead you choose tomorrow. We put it off. And actually Seneca says something similar. He says, the one thing fools all have in common is that they're always getting ready to begin. The point for Marcus was that you do it now, not later. You do it now. The Stoics believed in this idea of sympatheia, that there was this whole, this collective we're in. Marcus Aurelius talks about the common good dozens and dozens of times in meditation. He believed that, yeah, he was a Roman, and yes, he was the head of the Roman Empire, but all human beings were connected, that all human beings shared an affinity and a relationship and an obligation to each other. In book 654, he says, what injures the hive injures the bee. What's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. What's bad for the bee is bad for the hive. And this was a time of such immense cruelty and selfishness and indifference to what was happening elsewhere. Marcus Aurelius is saying, no, your job as a human being is to care about other human beings, not just the ones immediately nearest to you or related to you, but ones you'll never know, ones you'll never meet, ones who have never even been born. Stoicism does not make you a sociopath. If anything, it makes you care more about more people. We don't know a lot about the policies that Marcus enacts. We know of a couple. One, he passes a law that makes life easier for slaves and protections for them. And then another, he demands that the gladiators be given wooden swords to practice and fight with, make a very dangerous, fatal sport and make it not so dangerous. I like this idea of Stoicism being, at least in part, about standing up for the little guy. One of the things he learns from the Stoics is this idea of a society of equals, of equal laws, of a ruler who protects the rights of their subjects. I just love the idea that Marx is talking about that in theory, and then he is in a position to do something about it, and he does. Not enough. None of us do enough. There's a reminder there too. You know, he reads Epictetus, he sees the brilliance of this slave who becomes a philosopher, and yeah, he makes the life easier for slaves, but he never questions the institution of slavery itself. But I do generally like the idea that Marcus did his best to practice what he preached. In Book 5, Marcus Aurelius talks about the proper role of philosophy in life. He says it's not as your instructor. He says it's as kind of medicine, an ointment. He describes this sort of ancient remedy for this eye illness where they crack an egg on you or something like that. I think his general point he actually is taking from Epictetus, who said, you shouldn't leave my philosophy class feeling good. You should feel like you just came out of the hospital. He says, because you weren't well when you enter. The point of philosophy is to challenge you. It's to make you uncomfortable. It's to fix the illnesses of the soul, of the mind. Even though there are passages of meditations that are soothing and reassuring, a lot of them are jarring. A lot of them make you uncomfortable. A lot of them really make you think, or a lot of them maybe you instinctively disagree. That's the point. Philosophy is not supposed to be an instructor. It's supposed to be a kind of medicine. Philosophy can feel like this impractical, inaccessible thing, but Marcus Aurelius writes in Meditations, he says, no role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you're in right now. He says, it stares you in the face. And of course he's talking to himself, of course he's talking about being emperor, but if it stares the emperor in the face, that no role is so well suited to being philosophical as that, I think it's also true for being a janitor, for being a stay-at-home parent, and being an astronaut. Whatever it is that you do, it stares you in the face. Nothing is so well suited to what you're doing as this philosophy. In book 6:13, Marcus says, pride is the master of deception. When you think you're occupied in the weightiest business, that's when he has you in his spell. There's a quote from the philosopher Bertrand Russell, who was not a fan of Stoics, but he said, the first sign of an impending nervous collapse is the belief that your work is terribly, terribly important. It's, again, a very humbling idea. Yes, Marcus Aurelius' work was important. Yes, he wanted to do a good job at whatever he was doing. But it was just a reminder of how insidious ego is, how self-important we often feel, and how easily we get distracted, again, with the inessential things, the things that validate us, that make us feel special, and don't matter at all. A few years ago, a friend sent me an email, came in the afternoon or the early evening on a Friday, opened it, and then I was like, you know what, this is like I got a lot to deal with here, and I marked it as unread, and I said, I'll get to it on Monday. And he dropped dead on a hike on Sunday. This is what the Stoics are talking about when they say, memento mori, when they say you could leave life right now. And one of the most haunting passages of Marcus Aurelius, he talks about how as you tuck your child in at night, he says you should say to yourself, they will not make it to the morning. His point was meditating on the fact that this could be the last email that you get from this friend. This could be the last time you sit down to coffee. It could be the last family vacation that you ever go on, for you or for them, right? And that we can't take people or places for granted. I don't think Marcus is doing this exercise, meditating on the loss of his child, to disconnect, to detach from them. The opposite. It's to connect more deeply with them, to remind himself what was truly important, which was the present moment. And his other brilliant meditation on the ephemerality of life, he says, you're afraid of death because you won't be able to do this anymore. You won't be able to wait in line at the DMV. You won't be on another stupid, pointless conference call. So much of what we spend our life doing is a complete waste. And then we say we're afraid of death. We say we feel like we don't have enough time. You do have enough time. You just have to stop wasting it. I was talking to someone recently who had this high-flying business. It was super successful out of nowhere, made all sorts of money, got all sorts of wonderful public attention, and then it turned. The business failed, and suddenly they weren't held up as this business success, but as an example of a business failure. And I told them one of my favorite passages from Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius says, we're like a rock tossed in the air. We gain nothing by going up and lose nothing by coming down. None of this says anything about us as people. He didn't gain anything by being made emperor. He wouldn't have lost by losing it. None of it, Marcus Aurelius says, means anything about us as people. Even though Marcus Aurelius says we must avoid false friendship at all costs, even though he's betrayed by his trusted general Avidius Cassius, we know that Marcus doesn't harden his heart. He doesn't close himself off from the world. He's ready, as Michael Scott says, he's ready to be heard again, right? He constantly is putting himself back out there. But he does learn from this. He's a little more guarded going forward. He makes this analogy in Meditations. He says, you're in the boxing ring and someone's cheating. Maybe they're gouging or biting or scratching. He says, you don't quit altogether. You just change your fight plan accordingly. This is one passage that Robert Greene quotes from Meditations quite often. You don't quit, you don't storm and go home, but you are aware of who you're dealing with, so you adjust accordingly. The short lines in Meditations are the best. Discard your misperceptions. Stop being jerked around like a puppet. Limit yourself to the present. They're just a couple of words. They say so much, and they cut through so much space and time. He never uses two words where one will do. He doesn't beat around the bush. He just comes out and says it. And the advice is so clear, so obvious. Try to imagine the Emperor of Rome, this man of enormous power and wealth and prestige, trying to tell himself not to be a person of too many words or too many deeds. Pretty remarkable that he's even at that level talking about simplification. He's talking about modesty, talking about restraint. It's a beautiful thing and a very rare thing, to be sure. In meditation, Marcus Aurelius is constantly pointing out how few people remember the emperors who came before him. Who remembers the name of Vespasian? Who remembers this person from Hadrian's court or that one? All these names are forgotten. But he's saying this to remind himself that one day the name Marcus Aurelius will sound unfamiliar. Indeed, for hundreds of years it was. I mean, how many people even watching this video know much more about Marcus Aurelius than he was the old guy in the movie Gladiator, right? Even the most famous person in the world, the person they carved statues out of stone, whose name was emblazoned on buildings. So few people know of him today. And that should be a humbling reminder for all of us. In Gregory Hayes' introduction of Meditations, he says there's an American president who rereads Marcus Aurelius every single year. Some research turned up he was talking then about President Bill Clinton. Now, obviously, Bill Clinton did not get truly the message of Meditations, but I think the point is, how much better off would we be if every leader, every person in a position of power was familiar with Marcus Aurelius? Because he was there, he had that job times 1,000, and he knew what you had to strive to do, he knew what you had to try your hardest not to do, he knew what you need to be great. And I think it's important that it's not just reading it once. Again, the idea of rereading it every year. So not just, hey, wouldn't it be nice if every president, if every world leader read and reread Meditations every year? We don't control that. If you reread it every year, what would you learn? What would you take out of it each and every time? I know that I've taken something new out of it each time I've picked up this book, as I have now for almost 15 years. Every time you dip into Marcus, you take something new out of it. And that's why Bill Clinton was rereading it every year, and that's why every leader, every parent, every person should do the same. I have some really old copies.
We'll skip to enjoy him.
Some of the so old the covers are falling off. I'm even scared to pull the pages apart. It's hundreds of years old. And I think one Stoic exercise, you can almost imagine Marcus doing it. And I think about it now even when I hold my newish copies versus my oldish copies. And think about who the person was that held this book 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Think about the translation that this translation is a translation of, is a translation of, is a translation of. And you start to get far back pretty fast, and you wonder where those people are. They're gone forever, just as someday we'll be gone forever, and maybe someone will get your used copy at a library sale or a garage sale, or it'll be passed down, your kids, their kids, their kids. None of us are here forever. And in a lot of different places in Meditations, Marcus meditates on how these old familiar names are no longer so familiar. And these people who were once powerful and super well known, nobody knows who they are. Think about all the famous people that have owned Meditations. They're nowhere, as you and I will someday be. The one prophecy that never fails, as they say. And Marcus knows that for all his power, for all his fame, for all his brilliance, he's not an exception to that rule. His memory might live on forever, but he knows posthumous fame isn't really worth anything. He says, focus on what you can now. Be present. You're not exempt from anything. You're a regular person. Eventually you'll find yourself on your deathbed, and it may well be sooner than you would like it to be, but such is life. One of my favorite passages in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius talks about washing off the dust of earthly life. I think studying philosophy is a way to do that. Going for a walk is a way to do that. The Romans would have done that in the bathhouse. We can imagine Marcus after a day of hearing cases or meetings. He would have been dirty, literally and figuratively, and he would have walked to a bathhouse, a gymnasium, and he would have cleaned himself there. He would have gotten in a cold plunge or a thermal pool. In fact, at a Quincum, where Marcus writes a chunk of Meditations, you can step in one of those pools. It's still running today. There's something beautiful and timeless about that, and I think very practical about the reminder of washing off the dust of earthly life, literally and metaphorically. It was funny, I was going through my copy of Meditations many years ago, and I found inside a receipt. It was for Borders in Riverside, California. The store doesn't exist anymore. And then I realized it wasn't my name, my credit card on the receipt. It was my wife's. And I realized that shortly after my wife and I had met, I just read Meditations, and she went and bought that copy. That was something we shared and talked about, and this copy is still there with us. I'll show you a picture of it. But Marcus Aurelius himself is changed by a book recommendation. His philosophy teacher Rusticus gives him a copy of Epictetus, and they bond over it. Books can change our lives. They can connect us with other people. They can be with us for years, decades. I think there's something to be said in Meditations, but then also in my copy of Meditations, about the singular power of a book to bring people together. There's immense amount of control or influence that the translator has over how they choose to use this word or that word, and that can mean a world of difference. But also, like, when you just get the crappy translation that's in the public domain or the cheapest one on Amazon, like, you're selling yourself short. I feel so lucky I got the Hayes translation early. The point is, books are an investment. You shouldn't cheap out. You shouldn't get the cheapest one. You should get the one that's right, that's best. And there's a reason these things cost money, is that they're worth money. My life would have been totally different had I gotten the crappier translation, cheaper translation, or if I'd said, I'll just get it from the library, I'll skim through it and I'll give it back. No, reading is an investment, books are an investment, and you have to invest for it. I was once having a conversation with the great Robert Greene about the Stoics, and he showed me his copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. And you would write in the margins, well, AF. AF stood for amor fati. Amor fati actually comes to us from Nietzsche, who was not a particularly big fan of the Stoics, but expressed something, I think, at the core of Stoicism. He said, not just to bear what is necessary or accept it, he says you must love it. Amor fati, a love of one's faith. And it was Robert who made this explicit connection between Stoicism and amor fati, which I popularized in Stoic and our videos, my book. Robert and I even made this coin, which I carry with me everywhere. It has that picture of a fire. Marcus Aurelius, again, remember saying that what you throw on top of the fire becomes fuel for the fire. The fire loves what you're throwing in there. So I just love that idea, and I'm so indebted to Robert to helping me see this connection between two wildly different philosophical schools of thought, but finding this one area where they converge. One passage I marked down in Meditations when I first read it, Marcus Aurelius says, go straight to the seat of intelligence. Writing and reading require a master, so too does life. Mentors have been a huge guiding force in my life. Robert Greene, others, if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have a teacher, if you don't have the kinds of people that Marcus is thanking in the Debts and Lessons section of Meditations, you're not going to become what you're capable of becoming. You're not going to become anything like Marcus Aurelius. The remarkable thing about Meditations is that it's really a book for the writer, not for the reader. It's not for you and I. Marcus might even be mortified that we're here talking about it, because he never intended to publish it. The point of Meditations was his own practice. He was writing to himself, writing a note to himself. The book accomplished what it was set out to accomplish before it was read by anyone else, let alone, 2,000 years later, that it's still helping people. And you have to have that kind of journaling practice in your life, I think. How are you meditating on these things? How are you talking to yourself about them? What's the internal dialogue or debate or interrogation process that you have in your life that's helping you be what you're capable of being and who you're capable of being? Marcus Aurelius had a lot to complain about. He's betrayed, he's misled, people lie to him, people try to take things from him. He has a job that he doesn't even want. And yet nowhere in Meditations, what he thinks is his private diary that no one is going to read, we never once see him complain about any of this. He doesn't complain about being unappreciated, he doesn't complain about being abused, he doesn't complain about being put upon, he doesn't complain about the stress. Because, as he says in Meditations, we should never be overheard complaining, not even to ourselves. Concentrate like a Roman, Marcus Aurelius says. Concentrate on doing the thing in front of you as if it was the last thing you were doing in your life. I think about that pretty often. That it could be the last time you send this email. It could be the last time you have this conversation. It could be the last time that I sit down to write or that I sit down to make a video. So am I going to be fully present? Am I going to concentrate? Am I going to do my job? Am I going to meet the standards of my people, of my profession, my history? I'm going to concentrate like a Roman. I'm going to do it like this thing matters. Like I might not get another opportunity to do it. To me, that's the test. That's the standard to try to meet every day that you are lucky enough to be alive. Marcus Aurelius is clearly very strict with himself. Meditation is one rule, admonishment, almost impossible standard that he's setting for himself after another. And yet, we're told by historians, the brilliance of Marcus is that his strictness was limited solely to himself. Tolerant with others, strict with yourself. Conscious of the fact that it was called self-discipline for a reason. You control yourself, you control the standards you set for yourself, but you have to be tolerant and understanding of other people. In another part in Meditations, he chastises himself for not being a better forgiver of faults. And that's what we have to cultivate. This practice should make us better. Also, we're forgiving and tolerant of other people. Marcus Aurelius' hero of heroes is Antoninus, his adopted stepfather. As far as we know, Antoninus Pius doesn't write anything down. He writes no works of Stoic philosophy. He probably wouldn't have even identified as a Stoic or as a philosopher. And yet, to Marcus, he was the embodiment of both Stoicism and philosophy. He was clearly naturally this way, and I suspect some people naturally are. I think we can deduce that because Marcus did have to write this book, Marcus wasn't naturally this way. He was struggling like you and I are struggling. He was trying to get there. He needed the extra help. And it is inevitable that we will fall short, which is why in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius says to pick yourself back up when you fall, but he also says to celebrate the fact that you're a human being. What matters, he says, is that you come back to the rhythm of it, right? We're going to be jarred by circumstances. We're going to be messed up. We're going to slip on our diet, on our New Year's resolution, on the goal we have. That's okay. What matters is that you get back up. What matters is that more often than not, you stick to it, that you always come back home to it. In one passage, he goes, it's unfortunate that this happened. Then he catches himself and goes, no, it's fortunate that it happened to you. And we think about all the things that happened to Marcus Aurelius in his life. Plagues, war, flooding. He loses children. He has a troublesome son. People think his wife is cheating on him. It's one thing after another. But he doesn't run from any of this. He doesn't hide from it. He doesn't throw himself a pity party. Even though he felt sorry for himself in that minute, he always saw it as an opportunity. He rose to the occasion. One ancient historian would say that Marcus doesn't meet with the good fortune that he deserved. But then he says, but I admired him all the more for that, because he preserved himself and the empire despite these extraordinary circumstances. That's what greatness is. That's what the obstacle is the way is really about. Several points in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius summarizes what are, in effect, the three disciplines of Stoicism that you need to know always. Perception, how we see things. What part of this is in my control, what isn't actually, how do I see it as clearly as possible? Then the next step is, what are you going to do about it? What action can you take? And the third part is the will, the fortitude, the strength, the perseverance that you bring to bear on that problem, obstacle, situation. Perception, action, will. That's the essence of Stoic philosophy, which Marcus organizes Meditations around and returns to repeatedly, over and over again. Marcus Aurelius would have been cheered everywhere he went. There would have been parades. He was given a Roman triumph. They built statues of him. They flatter him. In every room, he's the most important person there. Yet he has this remarkable way of describing all of that. That clapping is the smacking of hands. He says that cheering is the clacking of tongues. Doing that contemptuous expression that we talk about, the idea that this stuff doesn't matter. Let's see it as it actually is. Don't just take it for granted that a standing ovation says something special about you, that obviously being all these people talking about you is important. Think about what it actually is. Think about what it actually represents. Break it down and see it in this skeptical, almost cynical light, and it loses its power over you. Obviously, Marcus is an idealist. Obviously, he's a perfectionist. Obviously, he wants to be good and he wants other people to be good. Yet he's also pragmatic. He's also realistic. He says in Meditations, don't go around expecting Plato's Republic. Cicero says of Cato that he acted as if he lived in Plato's Republic instead of the dregs of Romulus. Obviously, you want to be good despite what's happening in the outside world, but you can't also expect perfection or a utopia because we don't live there. You have to be pragmatic and realistic and practical. Or you're just setting yourself up to be disappointed. You're setting yourself up to have your heart broken, which is what Marcus is preparing against at the beginning of Meditations, like we talked about. He says the people you are going to meet are annoying, jealous, frustrating, mean, all of that, right? Not the things in Plato's Republic. You got to be ready. You got to expect those things. Not only can you not expect Plato's Republic, you have to deal with the place that you're in. You got to make practical decisions based on what you're in. He says if the cucumber is bitter, throw it out. He says if there's brambles in the path, go around. Don't despair. Don't be mad. Don't wish it was otherwise. Just get to work. Start where you are with what you have and build from that. Almost every smart person that's ever lived has loved reading. Love books. They lose themselves in books. And yet, why does he write at the beginning of Meditations that he needs to stop reading to throw away his books? Well, it's because any virtue taken too far can be a vice, right? Marcus Aurelius probably loved going into his books because his books were simpler than the job that he had. His philosophy texts were cleaner and clearer than the complicated moral ambiguities of life. He was saying that a philosopher has to be a doer, not just a thinker. In fact, the Stoics, they didn't like what they called the pen and ink philosophers, the people who were just readers. They weren't doers. It's good advice. It's wonderful to read, and you should read as much as possible. But you can't live in there. You have to live in the real world. You can imagine that as the emperor of Rome, people had a lot of strong opinions about Marcus.
thought he was the best in the world. They thought he was the worst in the world. They thought he sucked. They thought he was amazing. He would have been bombarded with opinions about him. He has to not think about it. He has to set his own standards. He has to keep his own inner scorecard. He says at one point in meditation that the perks of his job is that you can earn a bad reputation by doing good deeds. Think of someone like Harry Truman, who makes a bunch of momentous, critical, probably the correct decisions, but he leaves office one of the least popular presidents in American history. That's what Marcus is talking about. People have strong opinions about what you do, but you have to set your own standards, your own scorecard. You have to do the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it's going to make you popular, or conversely, not concerned whether it might make you unpopular. Objective judgment now at this very moment. Unselfish action now at this very moment. Willing acceptance now at this very moment. He says that's all that you need. That's the formula for turning an obstacle upside down. First, you have to see it clearly. Second, you have to focus on what's possible, what you can do for others here. And third, you have to accept the parts of it that are outside your control. You have to bring a kind of fortitude and a strength to it. Perception, action, will. That's all that you need. I was lucky enough actually to interview Gregory Hayes, the translator of these two books, way back in 2007. And I asked him what his favorite passage in Meditations was. And he said this, I'll read it to you. He said, "Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone. Those that are now and those to come. Existence